The following is a special presentation of Ashland University's Journalism and Digital Media Department.
Welcome to our Center for the Arts TV studio. I'm Zack Lemon alongside Dr. Bill Crothers, the Interim President for this year here at Ashland University. Dr. Crothers, thank you for being here.
It's good to be with you.
So can you tell us just a little bit about who you are, introduce yourself to the Ashland University community?
Wow, okay. Well, most of my career has been in higher education, although I started out in public accounting. I've worked at a few colleges and universities around the country, at both very large public universities and very small private colleges. I served as president of Roberts Wesleyan College in Rochester, New York for 21 years and retired in 2002 and probably retired too early. I was probably too young when I started. I was 38 when I started as a president. So I started a consulting business, working with colleges and universities primarily. And I've worked over the last 12, 13 years now with close to 50 colleges and universities across the country. And in 2006-07, I served as an interim president at Asbury University in Kentucky. And in 2012-13, I served as an interim president at Judson University in Chicago. So here I am doing it again.
There you are. So can you talk about how your experience, both as working with that consulting firm and then your previous two stints as an interim president, bringing that kind of experience here to Ashland in what is, I guess, a troubling or concerning time. Can you talk about what that experience that you're bringing will be able to help with Ashland?
Mm-hmm. It is a troubling time for higher education generally. The experiences I've gained both as a consultant and as a president and interim president, I'm sure will be helpful here at Ashland. In my consulting practice, I work primarily with presidents and boards of trustees in strategic planning, finance, fundraising, board governance, those kinds of issues, administrative issues. And there are some dimensions to Ashland that are challenging, and I need to address similar subjects here.
So what about Ashland really attracted you, brought you in here?
Well, I wasn't looking to do this again, but somehow they found me. And when I talked to the consultant that they had hired to help them in the search, I learned about Ashland and some of its history and tradition. I went on the website and I noticed that Ashland has a very vibrant religious life program. And the colleges I've been working with throughout my career are primarily Christian liberal arts colleges. So I was intrigued by that and by the history of the university. Ashland is different than the other schools that I've worked with, but it shares some common values. And then as I talked with the consultant about what they were looking for in terms of a skill set for the interim president, I thought that fit pretty well who I am. And at that point, I opened up to the possibility of trying to help here at Ashland. So I accepted the offer.
All right. So yesterday, there was an all-institutional meeting, and you referenced several things that are really going to that you're going to really focus on in your time here. Can you go over what some of those aspects you're going to focus on are?
Sure. Were you there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you can help me remember. We currently have an operating budget issue that we've got to address. And so we will be looking at that and trying to address those issues. We are in the process of doing a comprehensive review for the university. The Board of Trustees actually launched this project along with faculty leaders and administrators. And it's a well-established process for examining an institution and identifying priorities and considering possibilities for stopping doing some things in order to fund other things at a higher level. So that prioritization process is part of this project. And there are probably a dozen committees involved in this project, involving lots and lots of faculty and administrators, trustees, and so we're going to walk through that process as well. Oh, let's see, what else did I talk about?
I know you had talked about your pride in that Ashland University has that liberal arts tradition and that liberal arts core, but you had mentioned that you wouldn't have designed it the way that Ashland did. Do you want to elaborate on some of the changes that you would like to see made?
Yeah, you picked up on that one sentence, didn't you? I threw that in there for full disclosure, as I. First of all, you need to know I believe deeply in the importance of a liberal arts education, having a core curriculum. My undergraduate degree is actually business, but I think somebody who's going to be effective in business also needs to be able to communicate effectively, write effectively, understand history. There are dimensions to a core curriculum that every educated person should have exposure to. Okay, with that said, our core program includes a commitment to a global perspective. And the way it has evolved over the years, lots of things qualify as meeting that requirement. I think there are other kinds of things that can be done that might give a stronger global understanding for students than some of the courses they've identified. I've mentioned to somebody a half hour in a taxi in Calcutta at noon would give a stronger global understanding to a student than a full semester of studying some of the courses that we've included as part of the core. So I just have a bias there. This university has very smart faculty, and they've been working at this a long time. They're going to visit the core again this year, and I'm sure they will refine the core and make it an even stronger experience.
You'd also mentioned number of credit hours across both, I think you had mentioned both the core and some majors as well. Can you just elaborate on some of the issues with numbers of credit hours that students are facing?
Yes. A student in the United States has to have 120 credits to get a bachelor's degree. But, we have 40 plus credits in the core. Some majors are very large. And some of that is due to state requirements. For example, the education major, the state is very prescriptive in terms of the work the students have to do. Nursing is a pretty prescriptive curriculum, so forth. But I think it's important for college students to have the opportunity to take electives, to experience a variety of disciplines, because through that process, one can sort out what they want to do in life. And when that option is not available, you have to decide very early in the process what you want to major in. And if you change your mind, you're going to add another year to your education experience. So I threw that into the speech just as a way of trying to challenge the faculty a little bit to think about that issue. I really don't expect the university will get into that a lot the year I'm here, but maybe we've planted a seed that will surface again in the future.
Another issue too that you were very emphatic about, just got out of the way immediately, was the, I guess, rumors, you could say, that Ashland University was going to close.
Yes.
Can you just, I guess, repeat that for emphasis?
Yes. Well, that's absurd, really. I mean, it really shows the lack of understanding of some of the people that would raise that even as a reasonable thought. This is a $100 million operation. Schools of this size don't close overnight. I've worked for years and years with colleges all over the country in finance. And I can tell you, it is just not even close to reality. So the reason I brought that up is simply because I've heard that too. And I thought, man, I just don't want anyone spending any energy on that question. There's no question in my mind but what this university is going to be here for a long time. So that was the motivation, just to kind of get that out of the conversation so we can focus on real issues.
Good to hear. I really don't want to graduate from anywhere else. You had mentioned too the debt, and the Ashland University debt has kind of been one of these things that every student has heard, whether they want to or not. It's an issue that everyone sort of feels hanging over the university. Can you talk about how that debt can be managed and how Ashland University can continue to be an excellent university going forward?
Sure. We do have too much debt. We also have some first-class buildings, so the experience that students are getting is pretty positive. But we do have to manage that debt, and it would be better if it was smaller. Frankly, one of the challenges that Dr. Fred Finks has on his plate as chancellor is to talk with major donors to help address that issue. And he has a strategy. Every day he wakes up thinking about that. He's going after it, and he's out talking to key leadership people to address that. And I think in time that debt will come down through gifts that he's able to raise. And so, we have a beautiful campus, some exceptional buildings for a campus of 6,000 students. This is a pretty nice place, and it's just a matter of managing around that.
Are there any plans to reach out to, you mentioned the major donors, but are there issues where you can reach out to different alum or smaller donors rather than solely focusing on those like the Jack Millers, the Dwight Schars, those
Sure.
high profile donors?
Well, yes, the development office does that routinely, but obviously large gifts solve problems a lot quicker than small gifts, but we do have a development office that's out talking to alumni and friends, getting annual support and so forth, because we have to raise annual support to pay for the scholarships we grant as well. So we can't focus just on the debt. We also have to raise support for this year.
Another issue you had brought up as well was the lack of funding previously for marketing. We also heard Dr. Scott Van Loo's presentation about the new university marketing, new tagline. Can you talk about how a re-emphasis in marketing and branding this university can really help bring us forward?
Yes. I would really like to see us invest more in marketing. This is a relatively complex organization, and we do need to market various programs, and we're not spending nearly enough in marketing. I really like the new tagline, extraordinary happens on ordinary days at Ashland, and it's true. Extraordinary things actually do happen here at Ashland on ordinary days. That's a great, I think, great message, and he has developed a very good marketing strategy. We just have to put more money behind the marketing effort. We need to be doing more in social media and some of the current technologies and so forth, in addition to the more traditional billboards and newspapers and that kind of thing.
So there's definitely changes that need to happen to allow Ashland to be financially viable for the future. There's also, as you've mentioned, a great tradition, a great history of excellence here. I guess I'll rephrase it. How are you focusing on the challenge of changing what needs to be changed while staying true to some of these traditions?
Yes. Well, understanding that is the first step. There are some really great programs here, and as I mentioned yesterday, real distinctive programs and marks of quality throughout the institution. So we need to keep that in front of us and not jeopardize that. One faculty member here in the last day or two was telling me of a conversation with another college president who told him he was struggling with managing their finances, and he said it's like taking a steak. You can cut off a chunk of fat and throw that away, but we've already done that. The rest of it, the fat just kind of permeates the steak and just goes and so you have to be very discriminating as you make adjustments, that, a little bit here and a little bit there, based on where you think you can make reductions without jeopardizing the mission. And that's really what we're doing. And actually, I have been systematically going through the operating budget, looking at every line item in the budget. Now, just academic affairs alone, if you look at the computer printout, it's about 3/4 of an inch thick. And how many lines do you have on a computer printout? 50, 60, 70 lines? I don't know what it is, but it's a lot.
A lot to go through.
But you almost have to go down to that level of detail before you can really understand an operation. So that's what we're doing.
And with these changes, some obviously are going to take some time to develop and really start to impact the university.
Right.
Are there any changes that students can anticipate in this upcoming academic year, or will students not necessarily feel the changes immediately?
Yes. My guess is the students will not really feel any change. Now there may be changes that the students will feel as a result of the comprehensive review, because there we are prioritizing programs and services and trying to determine, in order to put more money into those programs and services that we highly value, we may have to stop doing some other things and take that money and put it, because there's not a money tree, you know. You have to work with what you have. Mm-hmm. And that's what that whole project will do for us.
And can you just walk us through how that academic prioritization process plays out, and just sort of the nuts and bolts of how that process works?
Well, we have several work groups on various subjects, all the way from looking at teaching loads and organizational structure and specific academic programs and specific services. Same thing in the non-academic areas, like student services, the various functions there, in finance, the various functions. So these work groups have a template that they will be following to analyze, to do a self-study, in effect. And every function and every academic program will be prioritized and placed in one of 5 categories. One, the top one would be, we're going to invest more money there, and the bottom one would be, we're going to discontinue doing that. So these work groups will be doing all of that analysis, collecting data, looking at the demand for those programs and services, so forth. They will be writing a report, and that report will pass on to a subcommittee that will look at all the reports, either academically or non-academically. Those 2 subcommittees will prioritize and determine how they think the resources should be allocated. And then a report will be written from all of that, and that report would then go to a strategic review committee made up of trustees, faculty, and administration, and so forth. And they, in turn, will create the final decisions around how resources will be allocated, and they will be recommending then to the Board of Trustees how to plan for the future. All of throughout this year, as all of that's going on, and there, like I said, there are probably a dozen committees, and every committee has at least 6 people, sometimes more. So we're talking 60, 70, 80 people involved in this. Then various bodies will be doing their own analysis and background work and feeding that into the subcommittees. For example, the Faculty Senate will be looking at all of this, and they'll be registering what they'd like to see happen with all these work groups. Probably different departments and others will have a chance to weigh in. So it's a pretty involved, elaborate, thorough process involving the entire community. This really speaks well for the university that we're being so systematic with that kind of planning effort. It's this is hard work, but very important, and I think it's going to give us a major competitive advantage in the future because we will fine-tune what we do and will only strengthen the institution.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add about this upcoming year?
Well, I look forward to it. I think it'll be a good year, a challenging year, and I expect it to be a worthwhile service here.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you guys, and take it back in the studio.